Good afternoon, everyone, and a really warm welcome to all of our guests and our esteemed panelists this afternoon. This is the second webinar in our collaboration series here from ITC. And today we're going to look at the use of collaborative defense and collective defense as a strategy to keep our businesses safe. And we're also going to explore the role that the threat hunters can play in that strategy to keep us safe. And for those who don't know me, I'm Arno Robbertse, the Chief Executive of ITC Secure. And I'm coming to you live today from inside our 24-hour SOC, Security Operations Center here in London, which is empty. It is empty for the first time in our 25-year history, whilst our teams and our people are keeping safe and working remotely. But they're still there, 24 hours a day, monitoring our client systems and keeping our clients safe in this digital world. And that's really what we're here to talk about today, because no matter what we deploy, no matter what cybersecurity system one has, it is not possible for any system to identify and stop every possible threat. In fact, many networks may have hidden threats, persistent threats lurking in the background, evading the detection of automated tools and security products. So as a result, we believe that there's a tremendous amount of value in having experts who can manually uncover these cyber threats, who can manually identify gaps in cybersecurity controls, and then take specific preventative action to protect us specifically against those threats, protect our systems, and protect our data. Now, these experts are called threat hunters. And the job of a threat hunter is to identify threats that have, or that are likely to bypass those existing controls and protocols that you have in place, and to take action against those. The role of a threat hunter really brings to bear knowledge and experience beyond what any automated tool can provide. And it's a difficult job because these threat hunters require a deep understanding of cyber threats. They need to have strong critical thinking. They need to have problem-solving skills combined with a deep technical knowledge. Today, ladies and gents, we are blessed with one of these experts joining us on the panel today. To come to talk to us about what he does on a day-to-day basis and to keep us and our clients safe. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Joel Bork, Senior Threat Hunter from IronNet, to you today. Joel, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your background?
Yeah, absolutely, Arno. Thank you so much, Arno. Thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Joel Bork, and as you mentioned, I'm a Senior Threat Hunter here at IronNet. I have been working at IronNet for about a little over 2 years now, and I have been a primary threat hunter in the finance and healthcare industry. So what that means is I've been working hand in hand with those SOCs at these finance organizations for Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies to better secure their environments, to hunt hand in hand with their security operations centers to defend their enterprises. So very similar to what ITC Secure does. They're working with your clients. We would work hand in hand with them to secure clients and make sure that these threats are found when they do bypass those security controls. So thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joel. It's a real pleasure to have you, and we look forward to hearing a lot more about your experience this afternoon. We're also joined by our very own Ade Taylor, our Chief Technology Officer here at ITC. Ade, afternoon.
Good afternoon, Arno. Thank you. Thanks for that, Joel. So as Arno says, I'm the CTO at ITC Secure, which means I have the pleasure of looking after the development of our services, our managed services here. And one of the things we're very lucky to have is access to people like Joel. So our collective defense service is based on IronNet technology, and that brings with it access to amazing resources like Joel. So it promises to be, I'm looking forward to Joel's demonstration. Interesting guy.
Fantastic, Ade. Thank you very much. Ladies and gents, thank you very much again for joining. As a reminder, this is our second session in our collaboration series. In our first session a couple of weeks ago, we were joined by experts from across financial services and fintech companies and also from cybersecurity vendors from across the world to discuss really why should we collaborate? What are the benefits of sharing information? And we also explored, expanded on that to identify what are some of the barriers that businesses and organizations face today when it comes to effective sharing of information. We identified that a lot of this currently has to happen manually, when often this information is time sensitive, and there's pressure on sharing the information quickly. Because that manual effort, it doesn't scale. And then ultimately, there is still a reluctance or unwillingness to share, either because organizations don't realize the combined value that they can create, the value they can realize for their own organizations, or because there are some concerns around information being used by regulators, or perhaps giving competitors a competitive advantage. For those of you who'd like to go back and check out our first session, all of those topics are covered, and hopefully we walked away with everyone agreeing that we need to do better, that there is great value in sharing, that it needs to happen faster, more automated, and be able to scale. And that the information sharing for the mutual benefit of you and those around you should become part of your cybersecurity strategy. So today, when we move into the, well, how do we make that a reality part of our series? Ade, I'd like to kick off with you, because over at ITC, we have believed for a long time and continue to promote collective defense, particularly as part of a combined cybersecurity strategy. But what does this practically mean for individual businesses, and what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. I mean, we, as you said, there are still objections. Hopefully, we're overcoming those to the sharing of what is, ultimately very sensitive, potentially very sensitive information. But the benefits greatly outweigh the risks or the downsides. So the first thing we have to think about really is that everyone has been running some kind of collective defense for years or decades. I mean, you could say that antivirus is a collective defense mechanism, right? There are anyone who runs an antivirus platform, which is probably everybody, it benefits from risks and indicators of compromise seen by anybody else that uses that platform, right? So somebody somewhere centrally, or a set of tools somewhere centrally, is looking at collective risk and defining a set of rules to push down to your AV or intrusion prevention system. So it's not a new thing, but that is what I tend to refer to as passive collective defense. So what we're talking about now, which is very different, is active collective defense, where we, in our SOC, enable our customers to take advantage of what we see and what our tools see affecting other people at a much more granular level. And if you extrapolate that and you say, actually, we're going to group this collection of companies together into a special interest category or a sector or an industry or whatever it is they are, then what we start to see is some really interesting information about attacks which threaten that industry or that sector or those types of companies, which means we've got a much more accurate set of tools to monitor and to tweak response depending on your business context. And that is, I guess, the next thing I would say is that the most important part, the glue that holds all this together, however clever the systems are, it is people. It is those SOC analysts, threat hunters like Joel. Because although we have massive amounts of automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning at our disposal now, it's actually, I think, made it more clear that in order to rapidly understand business context and take action in those special interest groups in a relevant way, to take relevant action, you've got to have people there that understand what they're seeing, what the information is telling them. So automation is a fantastic tool. AI, machine learning is incredible, but it's only really very powerful because you have people who understand what they're doing. And and it allows those people to only focus on the things which they need to focus on, rather than dealing in the weeds with stuff that is a waste of their time. So I think, in answer to your question, how do you benefit from it? You take a service like ours, of course, a collective defense service like ours, where we will actively manage that risk for you based on your peer category or a number of other criteria, which can be anything really. And you use the power of the tools, but you don't get overwhelmed by the power of the tools. You use them to tell your good people the things they should be doing, and then they in turn use the power of those tools to apply remediation.
I think the critical point you make there, Ade, is then driving that to remediation, driving the action,
yeah,
so that we can get to a point where we are eventually proactively defending,
yes.
without needing to react the whole time, right?
Yeah, and we have to bear in mind that we're constantly being collectively attacked, right? So most attacks are collective. Especially, I mean, ransomware is flavor of the month at the moment. It's maybe not quite as a collective attack as distributed denial of service, for example, but it's very unusual to come under attack on a scale 1-to-1 basis. Normally the attacker has had access to huge amounts of resources all over the world, and they're targeting you, whether it's randomly or directly. It's not a fair fight, right? I mean, if you're being collectively attacked, defending against that on your own is becoming more and more difficult. There's this horsepower race between the people who are running denial of service attacks, or writing malware, morphing malware at speed, using cloud compute, using the same resources that we've got, right? And so it really isn't a fair fight when you use your very limited resources to try and defend against somebody who has unlimited resources, effectively, or an organization, or a loose collection of people with unlimited resources. You're going to have trouble.
And so, to bring that again back to what we spoke about in the last session, because these information sharing platforms do exist. So, for example, here in the UK, we have CISP, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Partnership, run by the NCSC, which is a great initiative, and ITC are big sponsors and big promoters of. But that still needs us. It needs companies to want to share, needs them to do that manually, and then other organizations to log in, process the data, and benefit from it. So then that manual interaction, I think, is what we're identifying there is a hold up for us to, even once we decide to share, to benefit from that. So perhaps, Joel, if I throw it over to you before we take the next step into what you do day to day, but perhaps you'd like to expand a little bit on how IronNet sees that collective defense, and how it can take, or you're proposing to take, that CISP knowledge sharing process or protocol and do that at network speed. Yeah,
that's a great segue. And it's important to realize, here in the States, we have similar programs. We have ISACs, sharing threat intelligence. And what it comes down to is that is a manual process. I was sitting with a state-of-the-art organization, and their security teams are still sharing threat intelligence via email. And that's the reality. That's the reality of the industry we're in. So what IronNet has done is we've created and developed a platform that, as soon as an analyst marks something, the data about that specific threat is shared in near real time. And that's key, because we're no longer sharing this threat intelligence via email. It's automatically shared to all participants. Threat intelligence is automatically created, whether it's about the specific indicator of compromise or the behavior itself. And I can get into that more later, but it's done at machine speed. And it's something that really hasn't been done in the cybersecurity market yet.
And it actually drives the action all the way through. Yeah.
That's it.
And would you say, sorry, just to jump in there, Joe, so the job of the human to extract context and relevance there, because of course what's really bad for one person is not necessarily really bad or exploitable for another. It seems to me like that machine speed sharing is making that job. You're probably not going to tell us that it is, but it should be making the job of the analyst a bit easier, right? Certainly a bit quicker.
Yeah, that's it. And not only do we share the data about the threats, but analysts from different organizations are able to share notes and comments in regards to that threat, which then makes it that much easier when an analyst says, oh, hey, somebody else is seeing this same threat. They rated it malicious or suspicious, and here are their comments. You have to realize from an analyst perspective, while I may not trust everybody, information and timely information is key. It gives me a launch pad where I can start my investigation, where I can begin analyzing a threat. And if I have other comments, it gives me a place to dig in deep first. So I'm not off in a rabbit hole for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. I can focus my time on the most relevant threats that are hitting either my sector or across sectors.
Sure, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Joel, if I may come back to you, being a threat hunter, that sounds pretty cool.
It can be, and it can be quite rewarding.
And what could you just give us a bit of flavor? What does it take to achieve or even to maintain that kind of status?
Yeah, and that's a pretty loaded question because, I work with an incredible group of people here at IronNet, and they all have different backgrounds, or most of them, right? They come from being operators in the federal government to working within different security operation centers, such as your own that you're sitting in, although it's empty right now. I know they're working hard remotely, but it's no one size fit all for threat hunters. Right? We have people with different sets of skills, and working together is key. But I think really it comes down to three things that we look for when we're either looking to hire a new threat hunter or train somebody into the role. You have to have an analytic understanding, right? Or an analytic mindset. The core of threat hunting is data, right? And that comes back to what we do as an organization as a network traffic analysis tool is you have to have the data. And if you're just analyzing certain pieces or certain aspects of your data, you may not have the full picture. So then being able to understand how analytics run over that data, how it presents itself, that's key to our profession. Next, I would say you have to have an analyst's mindset, right? So if you can understand the analytics, you then have to be able to follow the breadcrumbs, to analyze, to be able to threat model, to understand those threats and work your way around it. How did this threat bypass our security controls, right? We have all these signature-based detections and they still got in. So we have to understand how it bypassed it, what behaviors it's now creating, and then dig in deeper. So it definitely takes a certain kind of individual. And lastly, if you want to be a threat hunter, communication is key. Many times we're working hand in hand with our partners, networking teams, potentially MSSPs, and then there's on-prem security teams. So you have to be able to communicate. We look for people who fit into our culture. And what that has created at IronNet is not just an incredible group of people in our cyber operations center that work well together internally, but we're customer facing. We work hand in hand with our clients and with partners such as yourself over at ITC Secure to better defend our clients and provide defense in depth. That's what this is all about.
It sounds, Joel, like the key requirements are verging more towards data science than security. Traditional security, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, and it comes back to the threat hunting maturity model, which I took a peek at the agenda. We'll be discussing a little later today. But once you hit levels 3 and 4, it's very much having data science driven analytics, having that built in to your organization and into your detections capabilities. So here at IronNet, our cyber SMEs work hand in hand with data science. And those departments are working together constantly to fine-tune detections to continue to develop the newest detection capabilities.
And Joel, one of the points I'd like to pick up on that Ade mentioned earlier was around business context, because part of being the threat hunter is sort of finding the unknown, but then also when relevant and when appropriate to actually take action to prevent it. So could you say a little bit around How do you go about that process of getting the right business context? In what situations do you need a business approval, or when you're allowed to roam and work freely? I think a lot of people have that as a question on their minds.
Yeah, that's a great. And you mean me as a threat hunter when I'd be allowed to roam freely? I've never heard it quite phrased that way, but home on the range. So yeah, I think it's an excellent point. Is that it's a mix of the two, right? When we're digging deep into analytics, we're working hand in hand with their team, but then there has to be a point in time where we're working with our internal team to analyze other threats that their team may not be aware of, right? And it's part of our agreement that we are going to take it a step further than your security team will. That's part of the service we provide. So while you may have said it's roaming freely, we call it hunting, right? And that's digging deeper than a standard tier 1, 2, or 3 analyst would ever potentially go within your network traffic. And that's something we pride ourselves on, right? We're going to look at the anomalies of anomalies to really dig deep into the behaviors that are occurring within your environment.
Joel, and without giving away any secrets or names, is there a practical example that you can, or a practical anecdote that maybe happened recently, or a famous one and you and the team came up with that you can share to give our guests a bit of a flavor of what kind of things you and your threat hunting team might find?
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the flavor of the week was ransomware, right? And we get a lot of people saying, "Well, what are you guys doing to detect it?" And our tool is really fantastic because we detect on different phases of the kill chain, right? So no matter how that enemy is working on gaining access to your environment, what we're seeing is ransomware. They actually dwell inside your network for a significant period of time, and they're creating behaviors that would be detectable on the wire, but not by signatures. So being able to understand what that chain of events looks like and being able to model those, dig into the traffic, understand what our behavioral analytics are doing, we can begin curtailing those attacks as they occur and as that enemy is dwelling within the network. So it's an ongoing ebb and flow, as you mentioned, right? As these attackers develop new techniques, we're evolving our analytics, maintaining our analytics, developing new ones to detect those threats.
Sure. And Ade, so how does the threat hunting team or a threat hunting team fit into collective defense, and could the one exist without the other?
I guess the answer is yeah, technically yes. I mean, you could you could take the benefits. There are benefits of a collective defense mechanism like IronNet without threat hunting, but we see it as an integral part of the service. I mean, it's not something we break out from the collective defense service, because that's kind of the point. The point is we are going to get to some data that needs somebody to look at it, right? And it's if you go back not even that many years, there was an awful lot of data being output that nobody could really do anything with, and partly because that from security systems and syslogs, whatever, and seams, and partly that's because the quality of the data was poor for 101 different reasons. But now, if we have tools at our disposal that are going to do the grunt work and do the heavy lifting to get us to a point where what it's putting in front of you is something which demands attention and something which will be beneficial if an analyst sees it, then it doesn't make any sense to just throw that out as an alert to the customer and say, look, here's a thing you need to look at. We do the best thing to do with that is to then apply your threat hunting, your analytics skills, and come up with, either, depending on the customer and what your agreement is, either you go and remediate that, ideal scenario, you tell the customer this happened, this was the risk, this is what we did, it's gone, or you get onto their SOC and you work through the problem with them, right? So ironically, as the tools have become better, the requirement for people like Joel, analysts who understand data and data patterns, etc., has become much more relevant. I think they're a much more powerful tool now. We've got this better data coming from better tools.
And Ade, you actually hit on it earlier. You mentioned, hey, these endpoints, they have some form of collective defense, right? So when you talk about, can you have collective defense without a threat hunter?
Mm.
I'm not going to call it collective defense, but there is some threat sharing, right? It's very signature based. It's the known knowns that are
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
That is collective defense without threat hunting. What we've done is we've taken it, we're now analyzing behaviors. So even if those signatures change, we can still detect behaviors and then dig deeper to understand what's occurring at a network level, threat hunt into that.
Mm.
And then we share those, not just the signatures, but the behaviors themselves and network speed.
Mm.
Threat sharing isn't there yet. You look at Stix Taxi, they're working on a behavior feature in Stix Taxi 2.1, but most organizations are using Stix Taxi version 1 still. So
Yeah.
the industry hasn't gotten that yet, and that's where IronNet's really leading the charge.
And I guess you guys, I guess it must be similar to what we see in our SOC, in that there are some things, if we see things happen which an automatic response could be crafted for the next time it happened, then of course we'll do that. It will automate, easily identifiable indicators of compromise or behavioral patterns, whatever they are. If we can pick those patterns out easily, we'll automate. But there's an awful lot that you just can't automate, right? You need somebody to make a decision about a thing that they're seeing. So it's interesting that despite the sort of daily automation we carry out, the number of things which we still need humans to look at is increasing. I don't know if you see that.
Yeah, we do see it, and we hear often, CTOs say, "Well, can't you automate this?" And we often come back and say, "Well, let's think that through. Do you really want to automate that?" Right? What if that portion that you typically use, whether it's a threat hunter or a senior level analyst, to analyze, you've automated that, but then the wrong action is taken on it through your automated process? What now? Right? That's not something it's sensitive enough. You don't want to automate that. You want a senior analyst looking at that, because we have to remember the defense of your organization's cyber PII is at the root of this, and you have to do it right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Joel, you very kindly offered to give our guests a bit of a demonstration to show us the kind of tool sets you use, what you have available, and sort of what your day-to-day role looks like. So I'll hand over to you, please.
Yeah, that went quick. let me get started. Let me full screen this real quick, and I can give a quick snapshot into what the tool that we use on a regular basis is, the tool that we've developed. But as I mentioned, so it looks like actually the host has disabled screen sharing. So Sophia, I'm not sure if you're available to allow me to share my screen, but looks like that's been disabled for today. So we may have to move on. I'll give her a moment to see if we can. Oh, looks like it's activated. Thank you, ma'am. Click
She's
the little
listening.
button. We kept her awake. That's good news. Awesome. So Arno, are you able to see my screen at this point?
Perfect.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and jump in. We'll keep this pretty brief. I want to keep it to about 5 minutes or so, just to give you a sneak peek. I know we have some fantastic solutions engineers from our organization on the line. So if this does interest you, if it sparks your interest, touch base with our ITC folks or our IronNet solutions engineers after this, and they can get you much more detailed, in-depth, dig through analytics. But I just want to give you a brief high level of what we're really looking at, what we've been able to accomplish. So in this initial view, what we're looking at is your enterprise. And these red dots are malicious events, and these yellow are suspicious, and then these blues are unknown. Now, this is over a 30-day period, so you have to understand that you're going to have alerts on anomalies over a period of time. But when we scroll in, you're going to see two things. You're going to see these detections are strictly around, and this information that's shared on this is around IP and domain. These are standard indicators of compromise for threat intelligence we're able to share out across the Iron Dome. What we've actually been able to do is, now, I mentioned it earlier, we're not just sharing information on the IP or domain, but we've been able to classify threats based on behavior. So we're able to take that tool set, categorize it as a behavior, and now we can share those threats themselves, which gives you an added layer of protection for your organization that was previously not possible. So when you zoom in, you can now see this longer hash, but this is actually the threat that has been taken. We correlate on the behavior, and now we're able to share that behavior out in real time to better defend organizations within the dome. So let's take a different view. We can see here you have your enterprise and you have a few pieces of threat intelligence that you've shared out, suspicious, malicious events that have occurred within your enterprise. The finance industry is sharing similar threats, right? They're seeing threats in their environment and they're sharing threat intelligence, whether it's suspicious, malicious within their environments.
Joel,
Now,
just to clarify,
yeah.
my understanding for our guests as well. So when you say the finance sector, that those are finance sector or financial services companies that already have your product deployed. So it's confirmed positives within your product being shared amongst an industry, then being shared into your enterprise. Is that right?
You're absolutely correct. Now, what we do is whether it's confirmed or unconfirmed, we're actually able to correlate those behaviors. Now, it's anonymous. As you see here, what we do is we anonymize that data. So anybody in the financial sector who's a participant of Iron Dome, other participants aren't able to tell who they are. The data we're sharing is about the threat themselves, not about internal IPs, not about that information. So I know Ade mentioned it earlier, like organizations are hesitant because they don't want to be identified when they see these threats in their environment. We remove all of that fear. We anonymize it 100%, and we're just sharing information about those threats. So you're correct. We have a number of financial participants who participate in the dome. And as you can see over time, as your organization shares threat intel, as that finance sector shares threat intel, you're going to see common threads. And these are threats hitting both your organization and an organization in the financial sector. So you could take one of these, and this itself will have an alert, whether it's threat intelligence or an anomaly detection paired with it. Any questions on that, Arno, before I jump into a little bit more technical details?
Loud and clear, Joel, you've got us.
Awesome, buddy. Let's jump in. So taking it over to an analyst perspective, this is really about the life of a threat hunter was today's webinar. While those dashboards are excellent and it gives you a very high level view of what's occurring, not just across one sector, but I'll show you later across entire continents, really, we can dig into those from there. So it's about having a threat analyst's mind. You can take it from that perspective, or you can take it from the data itself. But having that holistic view, having all of that data is key when it comes to this profession. So if we're going to take this first alert, it is a DNS tunneling. It's an anomaly-based detection. This is around the exfil of data via a different protocol that you may or may not have detections around. But we can see here that this alert has never been seen in your environment. Let me see if I can zoom in for you folks here today. It's never been seen in your enterprise before, but actually in the community, somebody's rated this malicious, which can be shown by this little flag. So it's been correlated. Now, when we click on the Iron Dome tab, you will actually you'll be able to see the time, the industry. So we can see here in the finance sector, this was first seen in December of 2049. We've pushed the dates forward a little, so it's always an active demo, but it was rated malicious. And the analyst can actually share a comment. So this comment is a comment generated not by your analysts, but from an analyst at another organization. So it's important to remember for the folks paying attention on this webinar, every security stack is different. Every analyst at every organization is going to have a view. No matter how different, it will be different. So getting that context from another analyst can be invaluable at times. So they've shared not only resources from OSINT sources, but then they've shared in-depth details about the threat itself. So you can take this information, you can dig into the actual metadata itself, you can see details about the query, and then you can begin a threat hunt on the specific data. You can jump into encoded strings, see if, in this instance, root permissions are being exfilled out of your network, or you could pivot and actually run a hunt within our platform to gain deep insights into the actual network traffic itself. So let's pivot over to this suspicious file downloads. Let's say there was no correlated data throughout your community. This is where a threat hunter's job becomes a little more difficult. You're on your own for this one, but you can actually pivot right into a suspicious file download. You can see the metadata. We're able to prioritize these events or alerts based on pieces of the metadata. So now we're getting into the threat hunting maturity model, phase 4, where not only have we automated it, but now we're prioritizing things. Now your analyst, this is what you want to look at first. Or if it's pieces of the metadata where it's showing more benign features, we're able to deprioritize that for you to push it down as this is not the most urgent anomaly to take a peek at. But then from here, you can run a hunt, and we get very granular into our data, right? The more data is key. We have traffic summaries. We can jump into the scorecards to see destination countries, very granular, very in-depth platform with an integrated hunt capability. But then you can get down to the raw network traffic itself. You can download PCAP, and all of this is RBAC controlled, so you can control exactly who has access to what within the platform. But then from there, we have file carvings. You can pivot. We have a number of integration, whether it's SIM, SOAR platforms. You can take these hashes, take them over, see if they've been detected before. We actually submitted this hash to VirusTotal when there were no detections, and we've taken the screenshot since. This was actually a keylogger that was detected at one of our client sites via our anomaly detection, and it hadn't been seen throughout the community yet. So that is a very high-level overview of what we do, and I'd like to bring it back to the collective defense aspect of this. So let's say I take that alert, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, and I can rate this alert. I can come in here, I can rate it malicious. I can rate it unexpected. This was not red team behavior in my environment. But then I can share this comment with the Iron Dome community, and I can say this was a malicious keylogger, and take incident response actions, and I can list out exactly the actions I take. Now from here, I have my ITC Secure team who would then, we would work hand in hand to remediate those threats at a client site. But as soon as you submit that rating, threat intelligence has automatically been shared to all other participants in the dome about this specific threat and behavior. So now we take it back to our holistic view. We can see here we have our enterprise. We just shared threat intelligence over here. But as Ade mentioned earlier, we have APT level actors working together now. We as a security industry have to work together to defend our enterprises, because they're not, we used to believe it was just focused at finance. What we realized over time is those same threats are not just hitting finance, they're hitting other enterprises, they're hitting different sectors, and that information is valuable across sectors, across countries, and across communities. And I'll turn it back over to you, Arno, for any questions you have on this.
That's very interesting, Joel. Thank you very much for that insight into what you guys get up to. Just one question, and it's a little bit of a tangent, so I'll bring it back after. But the information that you're showing here in the examples you gave in demonstration shows a much deeper dive into the internal systems and traffic and activity inside a company. Mm-hmm. To what extent does a threat hunter rely on or use external threat intelligence? So information from the deep and dark web, information perhaps on social media about planned attacks, or is the role of the threat hunter more focused on what is actively happening inside the organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually, as we have a team of threat hunters, we actually have an incredible threat intelligence team. And this is something that, they do a lot of work in the background, but they should be front and center, because they not only scour the internet for all of the latest, greatest stuff, whether it's Twitter, dark web, etc., but they're also pulling down, we have a emerging threat and detection team, which pulls down new types of malware, reverse engineers it, and they pull out indicators, whether behaviors on the wire or IOCs, pass it to our threat intelligence team. And what we do is we actually, with a white glove approach, we're able to share these threat intelligence rules across all of our partners. So we're helping, of course, threat intelligence is key, but we curate a threat intelligence list every single month, push it to our partners, whether it's about APT activity, new malware that's been seen throughout those open source or paid sources. But really it's 5-pronged, right? We have our emerging threat and detection team. We have free threat intelligence sources, paid sources. Then we have OSINT research, and then we also use those other resources you mentioned. So that's our approach to threat intelligence and proactively defending our clients through that approach.
What kind of participation level do you get from? I'm just curious from participants, from customers, Joe. So I mean, there's an awful lot you can, as a member of a collective defense platform, there's an awful lot that you can take. There's a lot of benefit. I mean, how prepared are people to give to this community as well? Do you have what we used to call lurkers, or is everybody really an active member of the system?
That's a great question. And we have organizations at all levels. We have some who are ingesting the data, who get these automated correlations, and they action them from there. But then we have others who are actively engaged, right? So we've worked with a number of finance customers where we had an initial anomaly detection, and it's kicked off an entire investigation throughout their organization. They wrote white papers on it. They did internal and external presentations on it. And we worked hand in hand to curate entire white papers on specific threats. So we have the whole gambit. We have organizations who have their own threat hunting teams that work together with us. And then we have other companies who don't, and they actually pay for us to threat hunt more than our standard contract to threat hunt within their environment. So all gambits of participation, and that's to be expected. And we're excited to gain more.
But you have seen, people who are competing in business working together in situations like that, which is it's remarkable, really. It is, and it's happened quite quickly, actually, I think.
And you'd be surprised, while there are some who are still a little cutthroat and they say, well, if they get hacked, it's better for me. But in reality, it's not.
Yeah.
Because as soon as that organization's hacked, guess where their attention turns?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So in cyberspace, guys, we're all in. I know you've heard this a lot with COVID, but we are all in this together.
Yeah.
And we do see that as the reality as well. When a company's breach, consumer confidence in that industry is dented. Regulation may go up. Insurance policies are likely to go up. So the net impact on that industry is negative for everyone in it. So there is a combined benefit for all. We have a question come through from the audience from Jack Cooper. It says customers might be worried about the amount of information they are sharing, assuming this is through the platform. What steps are put in place to ensure that only relevant data is shared, again, in the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So as I mentioned, we're anonymizing any internal data, right? So we're stripping all internal IPs. We're stripping any and all mention about your organization, internal domains. We work hand in hand with your entire IT team to make sure that anything owned by your domain is stripped out, or by your enterprise is stripped out. And what you can see is when we zoom into these specific detections, what's shared is comments by other analysts. And when, as you saw from when I closed an alert, it says, please don't share any internal information. But then what's shared is correlation context, severity, ratings, and then timestamps, right? When was this seen? For an analyst, you have to understand that timely information and being able to say this was seen within the last 72 hours, within the last week, within the last month. How relevant is it to my organization? How new is this threat? So that is the information that's shared, not information about your enterprise. And we have entire papers and documentation stating exactly what data is shared throughout the communities to put your mind at ease.
Great, thank you for that answer, Joel. Joel, you mentioned during your demonstration something called the threat hunting maturity model. You could talk a little bit more about that. I think that'll give people an interesting flavor for the work of a threat hunter as well.
Yeah, and we could get really granular with the threat hunting maturity model. Let's start. It's a 5-phased approach. Let me get it so I can. All right, and level 0 is really where it starts, and that's our initial phase, and that's where organizations really rely on those signature-based detection. They may have an endpoint agent deployed, and they may aggregate that into a SIM, and that's really level 0 of the threat hunting maturity model. Is you're just starting with those signature detections. Now, when you take it a step further to level 1, now the organization's still very dependent on those signature and automated based detections. But now the security and the IT teams are realizing that they may have visibility gaps. And in order to successfully fulfill their job roles, what they're doing is they're aggregating more data and they're gaining more visibility into their environment. And typically that's through feeding their SIM with more data. Now, level 2, so we're moving on to the third stage, it requires other techniques. So now these organizations have visibility into their enterprise. They're going out into open source resources, grabbing other threat hunting techniques, maybe open source analytics, and they're deploying them within their environment. And those are capable of detecting single types of malicious activities. So we do a test here when we deploy at new organizations, and this really tests the level 2 or the procedural level of this maturity model, is we do what's called a cyber threat emulation, where we deploy 3 specific types of behaviors on in your environment to emulate a threat. And what we do is it's not just 3 scenarios, we actually do 13 scenarios based around those 3 types of behaviors to detect, okay, you may be able to detect one of these types of behaviors, but we actually ran 4 scenarios of DNS tunneling. How robust are your analytics? And what we're realizing is organizations, they may be at this procedural level where they're grabbing open source data on domain generation algorithm or DNS tunneling, but their robustness of detection isn't quite there, isn't to the level where our data scientists have taken it. And bringing that to light and showing organizations that this is where you're at in your detection capabilities and here's where we're able to take you, that's key. And that really takes us to the third level, or the innovative level of this threat hunting maturity model. And this no longer relies on procedures developed by others, right? It's analytics developed in-house. It's collecting a high level of data. It's this, and this is where things get really expensive for an enterprise. If you go to this level of threat hunting by yourself, you're hiring data scientists, you're hiring subject matter experts, you're developing analytics. And the thing that people don't realize is those analytics require constant tuning and love. And it gets expensive. And that's what we provide as a service. So we provide that constant analytic tuning, that phase 3 of threat hunting, where we have those SMEs working with our data scientists. And this is why IronNet was created, right? Was to get an organization and get organizations over this hump in the maturity model. Our founder, General Alexander, has the knowledge from the US Cyber Command. He was able to bring the right cybersecurity SMEs in with the right data scientists to create these innovative solutions and analytics for our clients, where really we can just spin up clusters, deploy the analytics so that you're not having to lift that all on your own. And
so if you're, sorry,
yeah.
Joel.
No, please jump in.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but so if you're at level 3, you're saying we do all the undersigned threat hunting. You know, we've got threat hunting nailed, but now specifically what we do is we develop threat hunting techniques for things which threaten our business, our context, our environment. So we are specifically crafting threat hunting to our requirements, right? That's that top level of maturity?
You're spot on. Yep. And that was innovative. And the last phase, which you were mentioning, is the leading. And that's why we're here in this webinar, right? It's about automating these advanced detections, prioritizing them, and then really, if you're going to be in the leading sector of this maturity model, it's about collaboration. It's about working together in near real time to take these automated detections and share these threats with other organizations, and to also receive shared information. Because once again, information is key in a timely manner. And that's what we do here at IronNet, and in partnership with ITC Secure.
Appreciate that very much, Joel. And Ade, perhaps if I bring it back to you, then, to what? If I'll ask a straightforward, blunt question: what makes it? What is the difference then between threat hunting and the managed detection response, incident response world that is perhaps a lot more familiar to many?
So I think, you know, the main and the first thing to say is all of these teams work very closely together, right? certainly in our environment, they're physically very close together, but in terms of their teams and their communication tools and the way processes are escalated through teams, from detection to response and the overlying threat hunting, they work very closely, right? And actually, you can't. There are many things that you can't do once you start getting into the security analytics world. You can't do one thing without treading on some toes or touching on some other things, right? So a threat hunter is always going to come up with maybe some initial mechanisms for remediation, and somebody who's working in an MDR, a managed detection and response type service provision, is also going to be doing a little bit of threat hunting, right? But we have people who have their specified roles, and the difference between MDR and threat hunting and response is that the I would say the MDR and the incident response teams are kind of business as usual. So they are using tools to detect things that are going on in your environment. They are managing the systems which take automatic remediation action, and they are following playbooks and that we have crafted over the years in order to work with an incident response team, your incident responders, your IT team, as well as their own, to fix the problem, right? But overlaying all of that, ticking over all the time, you have the people who are actually going out and looking for stuff, not necessarily stuff that we have detected, right? So it may well be that they're looking for things which threat intelligence has told them may or may not be a problem in certain environments or certain customers or even certain countries, or there's a million and one different things that could send them off on this trail. They're looking for things, they're testing the model all the time, they are trying to find scenarios which exist and are provable by the data that we have. And that's kind of one thing, is that they're looking for new stuff. They're using their analytic skills, they're using information from threat intelligence, and they're looking for new stuff. They're building search models, they're looking for new stuff, new indicators of compromise. The other thing they do, threat hunters do, which is different to the operational teams, is when we do have a threat emerge at a customer, the threat hunter guys will check to see if that threat exists in other customers. So it's kind of an addendum to collective defense. The threat hunters will quickly identify what it is they need to look for, what those indicators of compromise or that behavioral pattern is, and then those are tools to go and see if we've got that same problem elsewhere and it just hasn't been detected. Because there's a number of reasons that malicious event happening in customer A triggers all sorts of alarms. Same event happening in customer B doesn't show anything, right? It's so dependent on the tools and the context and so many other things. So I guess that's the difference. They're out there looking for bad stuff, and then when bad stuff happens, they're looking for the extent of that bad stuff throughout our customer base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. That's why it really is a match made in heaven. You can't just have MDR or threat hunting. It's really bringing those two together, working as a cohesive unit to better defend your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. You said what I said in about 10 words. I was always quite verbal.
Also, so what kind of challenges do you guys face on a day-to-day basis? What would you guys as a threat hunter struggle with on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it comes back to, what does it take to be a threat hunter? You have to have an analyst's mindset. We, as a NTA platform, we have a significant amount of data, but we don't have it all. Sometimes we have access to SIMs, sometimes we don't within our client environment. So imagine putting together a puzzle without some of the edge pieces. Makes it a lot more difficult. So it is about that cohesion with the MDR team to get a full picture of everything that's been affected. I'd say that's probably one of the bigger struggles, right? It's about working together. It's about building relationships. It's about communicating well with the other parts of an organization. And it's something that we continue to work on a daily basis with our clients.
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree with that, and I'd say that, you know, threat hunting in particular. I mean, you can start off down some rabbit holes, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that don't end for days, sometimes, you know, sometimes weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a finite amount of people you can dedicate to working on those investigations. So you're absolutely right. It's about using the resources you've got. You know, going and talking to the SOC guys, the MDR guys, to gain more context, and using your tools. You know, there are so many great tools available now, but you've got to understand what's going to help you the best at that specific time and how to use it, how to leverage it. As everything, it comes down to resources and effective use of your resources.
Yeah, and Joel, so for young or old, starting with new, with the ambitions of becoming a threat hunter, we spoke about the wider analytical experience and the time to gain that background and knowledge. Is there any starting point that you would point people to? Any useful training, any useful tool sets to begin to build that knowledge with the ultimate career goal of becoming a threat hunter?
Yeah, and that brings us back to kind of where we started this webinar, and I think that's a great point. You know, it doesn't matter where you are in your journey in life. I believe that there could be a threat hunter in all of you. You know, it does. It takes a lot of training. This is a journey of constant, never-ending development. You have to get into the weeds. You have to understand the threats that are hitting the market that are ever evolving. And it's a task to continue that ongoing development, and it can be exhausting and challenging at times. So getting into the cybersecurity field, you know, it's something I've helped mentor numerous people to do. And I've written a few articles on it as well. So happy to dig into that. It starts with getting a wide spread of knowledge across the cybersecurity industry. I started doing penetration testing and for FedRAMP. So understanding cloud, understanding networks, understanding endpoints, being able to do forensics, you know, it is a very wide breadth, but at the same time, I don't know everything. But I have people on my team who fill those gaps. So being able to find a team of people that work well together is going to be key as well. Finding the culture fit that works well for you. You know, I have people like Anthony Grenga, the director of our Cyber Operations Center, Billy Trobiani, Melody Sampson, Stephen Monaco. These guys are experts, and they have their niches where they're absolutely fantastic. So find something that interests you, get really good at it, so that when you join that team, you can provide that niche value that somebody else may not.
Joel, thank you very much. It's been great to hear more about the team at IronNet, and also more about what you do on a day-to-day basis to keep us, our clients, and our markets and our sectors safe. And we really appreciate all your efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. As ever, thank you very much to all of our guests and attendees who join us today. As a reminder, this is the second in our series of webinars. Our next session is on the 27th of August, when we take the conversation from how, why, to actually implementing some of the collaboration that we've spoken about, and really making that real as part of your cyber defense strategy inside your organizations. As ever, any questions or further feedback, we welcome all engagement, interaction. Joel at IronNet, Ade here at ITC. We're more than happy to hear everyone's feedback. Thank you very much, everyone. Please stay safe and see you soon.